I've heard a lot about Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh as being a target. And like a lot of actually the few Pitt fans that I've ran into seem completely staunch against joining the Big 12.
Right.
Which has been a bit surprising, but still, I mean, like I was trying to understand that from the Pitt perspective, and I wanted to see from the Big 12 perspective, especially like, your marks and like the executive team and the president's perspective on, hey, should we look at a school like Pitt? Is Pitt a really good candidate for the Big 12? And again, this is through the lens, guys, of academics, leadership, cultural fit, geography, sports success, and brand upside. And again, brand upside is probably the most valuable. So just did a little bit of analysis into Pittsburgh from a Big 12 perspective. Let's pretend like we're Brett Yormark here looking at Pitt. Okay. So that's the cap we're putting on right now. All right, let's move on.
Okay.
All right. So from the first perspective, academics. So from Yormark's perspectives, we're looking to add the best academic schools as possible. That's the first item that he mentioned. And so here's the stack ranking of the 2024 U.S. News Best University ranking. I get it. Not everybody loves U.S. News. There's also Wall Street Journal. There's also the Shanghai Press. There's a few different ranking systems, but U.S. News is probably the most popular. These came out a few months ago, these rankings and everything. These are just the stack rankings of all of the Big 12 schools plus Pittsburgh. Where do you see Pittsburgh? Where do you guys see Pittsburgh?
Where I would have thought they'd be.
Yeah. Pittsburgh is actually very, academics wise, a really good school right here, within the top 70 in the nation. And they'd actually be the best academic school in the Big 12 if they were to join. So from the Big 12's perspective, as far as just academic rank, this isn't everything, but like when you're just looking at the academic side, they look like a pretty attractive ad for the Big 12 and stuff to lift the profile of the whole conference. So this first, slide here is really just to illustrate that Pitt would be the best ranked academic school in the Big 12 conference as it exists right now. All right, let's move on. And now a big part of that is spending, and we talk about research spending. Well, at least during last year's realignment cycle, we talked a ton about research spending, and that's the National Science Foundation research dollars spent, and that matters to research universities, public universities that do a lot of research. That's how you get into the AAU, being a large research university, and for a lot of schools, it's a huge deal. Not to every school. Private schools don't care as much about research as public schools, but you can see here that Pittsburgh is a research powerhouse, and really Arizona State, Utah, not slouches or anything, but Pittsburgh is a very good research university.
I was just going to point that out on the side, if you didn't mind. It was like, if you take out Pitt and you look at this, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado are 4 of the top 5. So that was one hell of an addition for the conference in that regard.
As far as research wise, the academic standing really lifted bringing the PAC schools over for sure, because all 4 of the ads and everything are AAU schools too for the Big 12. So now the Big 12 has 5 AAU schools, including Kansas, and the East have Iowa State too. But Pitt, this is just another illustration from an academics perspective. This is a massive research institution with a good academic ranking, and you can just see here the amount of spending that they did. This is back in 2021 information. This is actually a 10-year average going up to 2021. So you can see it continuously. They do a ton of research. That's important to them too. So from Yormark's perspective, again, man, Pitt, academic wise, looks like a really slam dunk ad. And you can start seeing some of the places where maybe the Pitt alumni might not feel like it's a great fit academically already looking at this.
And that's why you probably see some pushback from them.
Exactly. But let's move on, because academics are not everything. We know that. So when we're talking about cultural fit, this one's really kind of hard to put into the right words, but really I like to look at the mission statement and the value, like the vision of the school, and really what are they talking about? Pitt, if you look at the vision and values of Pitt, they talk, hey, we want to be a elite research university. When I'm reading these bullet points, that's really what I'm seeing here. So from a cultural fit wise, Pitt wants to be a research university, highly esteemed academic university. That's really the structure of really what they're built with. Hey, guess what? University of Utah, Arizona, a lot of those bring overs from the Pac have the same exact mission and vision statements, guys. So from a cultural fit perspective, Pitt is now better fit with the Pac schools added than they were beforehand, because there's more alignment with some of these new schools. And it's not, just the private schools and stuff. So Pitt's mission really aligns with those Pac schools that came over. So that's the big idea here. As far as cultural fit, I think, yes, the Pitt is a pretty good cultural fit, especially with the addition. So let's move on. All right, let's look here. So this is geography here. So geography, you can see, hey, is Pitt within, the realm of other schools? So you can look here at the map of all the Big 12. I try to get as close as possible as far as locations on a lot of these schools. So you can see Pitt is just right north of West Virginia. I mean, like I heard what's an hour or two drive from Morgantown to Pittsburgh. So you're right there. And in that target area, you're right next to Cincinnati too. So as far as geography goes, while it's a little bit outside of the bounds, it's right there next to West Virginia. So, I mean, it really adds that pocket right there, that geographic pocket where you're adding that travel partner for West Virginia and Cincinnati. It's almost like a perfect fit for West Virginia. You can see why Mountaineer fans love the idea of Pitt so much, not just because of the rivalry, because of how close it is. So, I mean, travel costs and everything considered, geography wise, it's a really good fit right there. So from a Yormark perspective, again, I'd be yeah, I mean, this makes a lot of sense. You can see here, it's right next to Cincy in West Virginia. Let's move on. All right, here we go. So we're going to get into some different ideas here. So yeah, Pitt looks pretty good, from an academic perspective. And now we're getting into sports success, more recent sports success. And I love to look at Football Power Index. To me, that's one of the most important metrics to look at. ESPN provides that metric. So I pulled this off ESPN FPI, their website. And you can see here from 2017 through 2023, this is a 7-year average FPI rank. You can see how the Big 12 stacks up with Pittsburgh. And guess who's right in the middle of this football success metric? Pitt. Right in the middle, smack in the middle.
Right next to Cincinnati.
Right next to Cincinnati. Yeah, right next to Cincinnati. So you can see historically over the last 7 years that Pitt's been, how I take this is Pitt's been an average level Big 12 football product over the last 7 years, as far as success on the field, as far as what they're fielding, recruiting, everything that factors into FPI. Pitt is an average football program in the Big 12. That's what this tells me. Let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to brand upside. And this one I thought about a bit here. So we talked about TV viewership last episode. And I think when we're talking about brand upside, I think this needs to come into play. Really, do people care about watching the product, your football product? Media companies kind of make brands in some ways. They create buzz, swagger, etc. So where does Pitt stack rank with the Big 12 schools, over the last 3 years as far as viewership goes? And again, this is the medium information. So this is taken from Paulson. So this is just based on trackable viewership. So this isn't including ESPN Plus games, ACC network games, Pac-12 network. It's only viewership on ESPN, Big Fox, FS1, everything that reports up through Paulson to get a Nelson rating. So you can see here, this is where Pitt starts lacking, guys, and is more of a laggard and everything. So Pitt really falls in the lower spectrum of Big 12 teams as far as viewership over the last 3 years. So Pitt telling me brand wise, I mean, currently Pitt isn't necessarily the highest draw. And I think brand wise, Pitt would be considered almost like an average level Big 12 squad. And this kind of shows that out here with the viewership. So Pitt really, they'd be the 5th lowest in the current makeup of the Big 12 conference as far as brand viewership goes. So let's move forward. All right. And so I know not everybody agrees with what Tony Altimore puts out, but I'm going to give him some attribution because he talks a lot about the blue blood ranking. That's the first time that I've ever ran across it before. And I've been looking at this a lot, and it's actually a ranking that I really agree with too. So Winsipedia.com is a site that breaks out like historical wins for a school and a lot of different data analytics, and they've got a blue blood ranking on their website, and it factors in things like national championships, like how many weeks ranked, AP championships, Heisman winners. They factor in a ton of different information from 100 years of history, and they come up with a blue blood composite. And you can see here, based on the blue blood composite that they put together, which I agree with, again, Pittsburgh actually stack ranks really high on that because of their historical national championships. But you can see here that Pitt, as far as the blue blood goes, history-wise, that Pitt stack ranks pretty well. So I think that you need to look at viewership and the brand, the blue blood rank, to kind of get an idea of what Pittsburgh is now. And I think, in my point of view, Pittsburgh's kind of an average level Big 12 program as far as a football product. Let's move on. And here's the last factor, too, that I wanted to consider here is like, hey, so what does Pitt bring to the table? I think Pitt brings synergy with the backyard brawl. We know that viewership, one of the triggers for viewership, one of the drivers is rivalry games. So having that rivalry game with West Virginia is actually a big value add for the conference. And from Hormark's perspective, bringing that backyard brawl game in. So that does need consideration because that lifts West Virginia and Pittsburgh if Pittsburgh comes in. And also, as a secondary ancillary factor here, is reduced travel costs for West Virginia, Cincy, and even UCF based on being East Coast. And you can make better travel partners, again, reduce costs and everything. So there's a lot of things to consider with this, guys. I mean, Pitt, to me, they look like a pretty solid ad. You bring great academics, you bring similar brand-wise history, but not as much viewership and recent success. So ultimately, I think Pitt would be a really good ad for the Big 12. I think that your mark and everybody else should probably get on board with that too. So that's the analysis. What do you guys think?
Here's a comment that I think you're either addressing on a sideways angle, or it's something that maybe, because we've been working on this formula since April. Ute and I have put a lot of time into this. Ute has done years of data collection. A lot of the data that you've seen out there presented by other people is actually Ute's product. So anybody who's questioning the way he goes about getting his data doesn't know what they're talking about. But this is something that I don't know how you'd measure it, but it seems like it could be powerful if you could. He says a variable that can't be measured is fan loyalty. Some of the lower end teams have the most dedicated followers, which ultimately generates money. What do you say to that, you?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify that, but what you could do, it's a good idea. You could look at average attendance for games, based on records and everything to get an idea of loyalty. And, just from an observational standpoint, I mean, Pitt doesn't typically sell out its football games.
Right.
And coupling that with its viewership, lower viewership, I would say that the fan loyalty is pretty low. Honestly, it wouldn't be necessarily high and stuff based on those factors, in my opinion. You could also look at merchandise sales, and to kind of get an idea for that brand. There's a lot that can go into it. There's no perfect way to do it. It's still the it factor too.